Now, before we start laying down knowledge and wisdom, a couple of items of news in brief. Number one, if you're here for the free bike giveaway, then you're in luck because it is now in the possession of my cartel. It's very, very imminently on its way to this very workshop. It's now in the possession of DB's Retro MTB workshop, whose channel I hope you've subscribed to on my recommendation. All I need to do is concoct an excuse for a trip to the home counties, and I will return with said bike and be doing a free bike giveaway very soon. Item number two, you may remember the beautiful yellow Muddy Fox that I built last year. More importantly, the gentleman, Simon, who supplied me with that bike, who did the most meticulous cleaning and strip down job I have ever seen, has another frame and fork with a seat post and stem included and handlebar for sale. Now, I have no space or use for this particular item, but it's very beautiful and I'm rather hoping to keep it in the family. So I want to show it to you. There are lots of things you could do with one of these. It is a Rally Appellation. It was near the top of the range in their lightweight range, which amusingly wasn't particularly light because it was made out of steel, but it was a beautiful, beautiful bike in 1988, 89. I forget when this came out. It would originally have been spec'd with a Shimano Dior group set. This was before LX or DX existed. This was the second from the top tier, which of course was XT. Those parts have long gone, but as you can see in the pictures, this is a build, a once in a lifetime opportunity for somebody if you don't already have a workshop full of retro bikes. I believe Simon only wants £50 for the whole lot plus delivery. So please do give me a shout if anyone's interested, and I would also be interested in taking a commission to build this up into something beautiful and making a film of the process. Anyway, let's get down to business. So today's video is something I've had requested many, many times, which is a poke around my workshop. Now, I'm not going to show you every nook and cranny in this place. We have to keep some mystery in this relationship. But I am going to show you 5 very satisfying and hopefully very useful hacks and tips. So without further ado, let's get on to tip number 1, which is storage. Now, if you live in the suburbs or the city and aren't blessed with many, many barn conversions to keep your bicycles in, like some of my cartel, you're going to need to hang your bikes up. Now, these rubberized hooks are something like £7 from B&Q, and they basically are self-tapping. They screw into woodwork, and as you can see, most of my bikes are hanging from them. Those that are kept standing on the floor are either leaning against a flight case here, like the Quinny, or they're in a shop stand. And when you run out of space using both of those solutions, what I have done recently, which I'm very proud of, is built my own movable hanging bar, which is basically a bit of timber from a shed that I built, a shed that's not secure enough to keep bikes in, but the leftover timbers have come in very useful. More of these self-tapping hooks, and then the bike just hangs up from it. This thing actually doubles up as a work stand because you can access the bike and tinker around with most of it without taking it down from its hanger. That said, of course, a proper work stand is a must, and we're going to talk next in item number 2 about one of my favorite items, which is tools. Now, with decades of accumulation and more than a few quid, I have been fortunate enough to accumulate absolutely every kind of tool I could possibly ever want, the best of which, of course, are from Park Tool, which are also, by no coincidence, the most expensive. Now, I'm not going to pretend that this happened overnight. Of course, the fact remains, and as Monkey Shred himself has demonstrated in one of his budget challenge videos recently, it is possible to do a lot of what I do on this channel on the cheap, and you don't necessarily need the full set. As a perfect example, I built this bike in the early 90s using little more than a penknife, a multi-tool, and a few non-specific tools that I nicked off my dad. For example, I'm pretty sure I braid these headset cups in using a standard hammer and a couple of bits of wood, and they've done all right for a few decades. And even these wheels, these beautiful XT hubs and Mavic rims, the first set, in fact this one, the one on the front, which is original, I'm pretty sure I built it with nothing more than a spoke key I got from a garden centre. Wheel building is the perfect example of why I always say you shouldn't lose heart and give up if you don't happen to have access to hundreds of pounds worth of Park tools. I was going to make a video in which I compared this beautiful Park tool wheel jig to a 20 quid one that I got off Amazon. To be honest, I'm not going to make that video because it would be very short. The conclusion of it would have been, don't buy one of these even if only for a prank. The fact is, it's so floppy and imprecise that you're not going to get any kind of straightness out of a wheel. This thing is utterly useless. And if I can be of any reassurance, I would say you would get a lot more accuracy straightening wheels if you just flip the bike upside down, clamp the wheel in the dropouts and used lolly sticks and bits of masking tape as a guide, which is what I did for years, and none of those wheels has ever let me down. So in a world of infinite tools, where do you start? I'm going to assume that when people first start getting into cycling and certainly doing basic repairs, they're going to start with a multi-tool. Certainly that's what I did, and any decent bike shop, when they supply people with their first bike, should say after things like helmet and gloves, you're going to need a multi-tool just for trailside repairs. The ones I like are by Peep. The Alien, this is an ancient one, but the Alien is, I think, the best one for mountain biking. It has everything on it that you need for trailside repairs. So this goes in my mountain biking pack. And on the road bike, this is also by Peep. I don't know what it's called, but I chose it because it's gold. It looks like it was looted from Saddam Hussein's palace. But it's not just aesthetically fabulous, it actually has everything you need for road biking. So those are my recommendations. But of course, this video is not about trailside repairs, it's about workshop tips. And when you're starting your own workshop, I have 3 core recommendations. The first one, which I think is really important, is a track pump. You don't want to be doing tyres with a hand pump. I bought this Lezyne one. It wasn't cheap. I bought it because it looked nice. It is a precision instrument, and I think it was worth the money. The situation I have, though, is that this is quite fiddly because it's obviously quite precise. You have to dial it just right to get it onto the valve. What that means is, more often than not, I find myself reaching for this one because it's easier to use. It's far cheaper and it's actually just as effective. It just probably isn't quite as accurate on the pressure gauge. So this wrench force would be my recommendation on balance. I can't remember how cheap it was because I had it ages ago, which is also a recommendation because it has lasted decades. So after the pump, the next thing is you have to upgrade to some proper Allen keys, or hex wrenches as they're often known. These ones are great because they're ball-ended, which means that you can actually get into the crevices rather than having to use a great lump of a multi-tool. So these are much nicer for leverage and also colour-coded, so you can instinctively know which size you're looking for. So that's a real first sort of proper upgrade from ad hoc repairs to a proper workshop. And the final thing, which I think is absolutely essential, is to upgrade from things like pliers or wire cutters or whatever you've been using to install cables to some proper cable cutters. The reason being that these actually cut the thing cleanly, which means that you can actually reuse the cables because you've got a clean cut that's round rather than squished flat. And that brings me on to the very important next stage, which is about reusing and recycling. If you're into restoring and preserving old bikes like I am, then chances are, like me, you hate throwing things in the bin. My kind of person. So that means reusing and recycling everything you possibly can. And I've got a few really nice example hacks here. First of all, I'd get Listeria if I drank out of 30-year-old drinking bottles, but they do make very cool looking holders for cable ties. Moving on, I use old cool stock brake blocks as door handles. I've got a XT cable straddle that I use as a key ring. I use old skincare product pots to keep cable ends in. I've shown off before this broken titanium bottle cage that I now use as a holster for my trusty WD-40. And for the reasons I've just talked about, this bin hardly ever gets emptied, which means you need to keep the bin bag in place to stop it getting worn out. And for that, I use a lovely old Mount Christoph toe strap. There are many, many examples. The list goes on and on. Another one I'm rather interested in is the fact that I made a sort of curtain runner to hang these curtains up using old brake cables. And why, you may cry, do I have curtains in my workshop? Well, that leads me on to the next important workshop tip, which is security. It's a sad reality that there are scumbags everywhere And much as I'd love to kill them all, the reality is you can't kill every single one of them. So thankfully there is a long list of steps that can be taken. Starting with this one, this is about invisibility. You'll notice I've lined the door to my workshop with this visqueen sheeting. That basically stops the enterprising intruder from peeping in between the timbers and seeing what's inside. That also is the reasoning behind the curtains. Next tip is anonymity. Even if your house looks like the Palace of Versailles, which of course mine does, your workshop should look like this. Ugly, anonymous, cement, and for goodness sake, keep all your trinkets and trophies hanging inside, not outside. Then again, the enterprising intruder won't know what's inside. Next tip is accessibility. I'm very lucky. I think the house next door to mine was once a diplomatic residence, which is why I've got 8-foot fences all around. If you don't have this, then I would recommend building something of the nature. So if anybody does try and climb over and get to where your workshop is, they'll hopefully get impaled in the process. Next recommendation, a guard dog. This one here is a combat trained Bedlington Terrier. As you can see, absolutely terrifying. Keep him at a distance, he will have your arms and legs off. Next, if he makes it past the perimeter, the scallywag will find himself illuminated by an incredibly bright floodlight, and the same motion sensors which are dotted around the place will also trigger a very loud alarm, and there's the red light showing that the thing is active. So those are very easy to install. This is the one that you can see, but there are plenty of others dotted about. Then, of course, you make sure all your bicycles are cable locked together. I've got several of these running through the frames of all of my bikes, so them being locked together makes them very difficult to shift. Sadly, this cable is not wired to the mains. That would be hilarious, but I believe it's illegal. And finally, while of course you want to keep your workshop safe from most of the world, it doesn't hurt to tell a few of your chosen mates in the neighbourhood and just ask them to keep an eye open. I'm very fortunate. The guy that lives next door, whose workshop is there, obviously I'm naming no names, is also a bike builder, and he works from home, so if he sees or hears anything suspicious, he will not hesitate to chase you down the street naked if necessary with a cricket bat. He has form, so I consider myself very privileged. And my last area of tips and hacks, which is one of my personal favourites, is potions. As you'll have seen if you watch this channel, one of my favourite things about restoring bikes is the cleanup. Everything from soaking things in vinegar to, well, a bit of painting and paint prep, although that's not necessarily my favourite activity. I've got cleaning products for absolutely everything. Foam Fresh for helmets, sticky stuff remover, obviously the trusty vinegar bath and the wire brushes. I've got a few interesting little tips that you might find useful. First of all, I've recommended before muck off when cleaning. This is my cleaning station outside. Pressure washing, obviously there are lots of videos on YouTube on how to do it properly. You don't want to overdo it because you can force grease out of seals and bearings. Muck off I buy in bulk and put in a pressure sprayer, which I got from a garden centre, actually for weed killer, but it's a perfect way of getting the stuff onto the frame without any waste. And then of course, once the thing is clean, Auto Sol is an absolute favourite for polishing. A grease gun is a must, a proper one. Lots of lubes. I've talked before about hairspray at the back there for getting grips onto vintage type grips, which aren't lock-on of course, onto handlebars. And of course, trusty WD-40, which I'm never far from in pretty much all my videos because it really does have 101 uses for cleaning, getting rid of rust. It isn't a lubricant, so don't be fooled into using it as one. It's a great degreaser. It's good for getting sticky stuff off. I'm not sponsored by WD-40, but I will sing its praises to the heavens. And finally, of course, for anything to do with cleaning, drying, polishing, mopping up, this blue roll is the cheapest and most effective way of doing it. It's super cheap. I buy it in bulk. And of course, all but the oiliest mush can be put in your paper recycler afterwards. So there we go, short and sweet. I hope you found some of that useful. I'd really love to hear some of your own tips and hacks from your workshop. So please do leave me some comments. And also, if you think I've missed anything or have any questions on anything that I might not have covered, also give me a shout out. I absolutely love responding to comments, one of my favorite things. So yeah, hopefully speak to some of you soon. Give me a shout if you're interested in Simon's Frame and Forks offer, and I'll see you very soon for the next video. Thanks very much.